Hi, I'm Dr. B, psychiatric nurse practitioner, and today I'm going to be talking about being comfortable in your story. And you know what's funny is actually just before starting to start the video, I had this overwhelming anxiety come upon me. And I actually stopped and mapped it in my head really quick. And it really got to me because am I truly comfortable in my story? I tell my story a lot. We've written a book about my story, but even the other day I was sitting with one of my daughters and we were talking about something that happened when she was in trouble as a teenager. And I probably did something wrong. And she's like, I noticed you didn't put that in your book. And I didn't. The details of that were not written in the book, right? And that's okay. I'm still comfortable in that story. So when I start this and I start to talk about how to be comfortable in your story, that doesn't mean you have to tell the world all the details, right? You don't even necessarily have to tell anybody all the details, okay? But it is about you truly being comfortable in that story, even if it was bad decisions on your part, right? Forgiving yourself for those things. So being comfortable in your story is really, really about moving forward. Okay, we talk a lot about, mapping things out and making decisions and the choice mapping, and we truly believe this helps people be mentally strong. But in that, a lot of stuff might come up, stuff that you didn't really want to deal with. And learning to be comfortable in that, I think, is super important for your future confidence and just to really be able to be happy. So, the big thing that comes up often is trauma. If somebody was physically abused and maybe it was by a family member, maybe a domestic violence, something that they witnessed, that they are truly changed who they are, and they are not comfortable in it themselves, let alone telling somebody else, right? We always hear of powerful stories of someone overcoming something like that. And you can be that person, but you have to start with being comfortable in that story. If it's trauma, it's not your fault, right? But it still happened to you. You still have to grieve that, and you can, feel the power of being comfortable in it. And I encourage you to tell at least somebody that you trust. Maybe you're not going to be like me or other people who feel called to tell their story publicly, but you could tell somebody. You could maybe help one person get out of a similar situation or recover from that childhood trauma. So trauma comes up a lot in being comfortable in your story. Sexual trauma seems to be even worse. And sexual trauma that is embarrassing to the victim is even harder to be comfortable in. We see a lot of veterans, and maybe they were sexually assaulted while in service and never told anybody. Feeling comfortable in that story. That doesn't mean we're going to, push you to, report it or anything like that, although, that may be what's right for you. But the first step is being comfortable in it. This happened to you. And you have to acknowledge that it happened to you in order for it not to affect every area of your life. So taking that first step and being, talking about it and processing it to feel comfortable in it, right? It wasn't your fault. Also, a thing that comes up a lot for men, a victim of sexual trauma, if it was same sex and they are personally heterosexual and they were sexually traumatized by a man and they never dealt with it, they're not comfortable in that story, it is extremely embarrassing for them. That is affecting every intimate relationship in the future, right? So we've got to take that time to process it and learn to be comfortable in it, right? We talk about the bad things that happen in our life form us into who we are, and that is so true. There's so much research out there that says the negative effects of trauma on the brain. And it does change you. It changes you physically, emotionally, mentally. But what I'm encouraging you to do is figure out how to make that stronger instead of, continuing to be the victim of that trauma. So that's a big thing, when it comes to being comfortable in your story. But everybody needs to be comfortable in their story. We often get people talking about like their family life or things that happen in their family, secrets in their family, and or embarrassed of where they come from. I was talking to somebody the other day, and her brother, all three of her brothers had been in and out of jail, and one of her brothers actually shot the other brother, right? And I'm assuming that this was a very dysfunctional family growing up, that there was probably trauma. I didn't have long conversation with this person. We were just trying to de-escalate from the recent death of her brother. But she was embarrassed. She was embarrassed of that story at the same time of grieving the loss of her brother. And all of those emotions were coming up at the same time. Now, this is not the time where I talk about being comfortable in your story, right? Like, we have to just let people feel that pain. But in time, I would encourage her to be comfortable in her story. She is a successful person. She, may have come from this dysfunctional family. However, she can be very proud of her decisions and not be embarrassed of where she came from, right? So family is another way we can kind of, maybe be embarrassed and not comfortable in our story. Your religious beliefs, or the beliefs that were brought on in your childhood that you're maybe struggling with or not, you don't believe them and you don't know how to be comfortable in that new reality for yourself. You don't know how to be comfortable in talking with your family about, your religious beliefs or your questioning of your religious beliefs. And so, learning to be comfortable in that. What if it's a decision you personally made? We talked a lot about, trauma where, you are a victim. Maybe there's something in your past that you are extremely embarrassed about. And, learning to be comfortable in that story. For me, I had an abortion at age 16, and then I had become this born-again Christian at 19, which I'm not ashamed of. However, it was immediately kind of poured on me to be embarrassed or ashamed of that decision. And I believe in the life of a child. But it was someone else's push to make me feel uncomfortable in that story. But it's what happened. It's where I was at the age of 16. And I have to be okay with that. I have to be comfortable in that I am personally pro-life and I had an abortion. And I have to be okay with that, right? So even when it's personal decisions that you may be embarrassed of or feel ashamed to tell people. And I kind of have that personality that I'm sharing my story publicly. I'm not saying you have to share it publicly, but working on being comfortable in that story and how that decision has formed who you are. Okay, a big thing with decisions we see is people that struggle with substance abuse and addiction. There seems to be a series of decisions that are embarrassing to them. They are ashamed possibly of their addiction and the weaknesses in not being able to stop that addiction. For you to get sober and truly be happy in your life, you are going to have to own that. You're going to have to acknowledge that I'm an addict. I had a substance abuse problem. These are the reasons why and the series of things that happen to get you there. And maybe you were a victim of trauma. We talk about, they always talk about gateway drugs, right? Trauma is the gateway to substance abuse, right? So if you have trauma and substance abuse, you have to deal with it you have to be comfortable in your story as the victim and as the person making bad choices, right? So that's a big story, but it's yours and you need to own it, acknowledge it, and be comfortable in it so that you can move forward in confidence. And then lastly, personally, being comfortable in your pain. I get all choked up even trying to tell my story of my pain, right? I lost my son, Johnny, in a drowning accident. And around the same time, my son was diagnosed with a terminal condition. And I truly, truly, truly believed God told me that he was going to be healed. And so I did everything, every natural treatment, every medical treatment. We did surgeries. We traveled to different states, even different countries, looking for treatment in this confidence, in this boldness that he was going to be healed. And he died. And he died in 2016. And I struggle with having that same hope and drive for my daughter and my husband, who also has that same disorder. But I owe it to them to find that strength, to find that hope. But I have to be comfortable in the fact that maybe I misunderstood God. Maybe God didn't say that. I have to be comfortable in that story that seems contradictory, right? So being comfortable in your pain, being comfortable in your spiritual conflict, which, I feel like I was taught you're not allowed to have spiritual conflict with God. Like you need to just trust him. And for the most part, I try. But being real and comfortable in that story. So I hope that I prompted you to think about, what is your story? Do you feel comfortable in that story? Like our video, share it with people. Everybody needs to be comfortable in their story, so go ahead and share it with everybody. But my goal in this YouTube channel is to actually empower people to be mentally strong. So subscribe. We put out videos on Tuesdays and Fridays. And remember that you too are mentally strong.